In 2021, we saw Amanda Gorman take the world by storm when she did a poem at the presidential inaugural ceremony. Poetry is powerful, and poetry is one of the best arts the world has ever seen. Now today, we are joined by our own local superhero. Before I get into it, my name is Florence Jedediah Musenga, and welcome to Beyond and Above, and I'm your host today.
Hello, my name is Musenga Katongo, and I'm an award-winning spoken word artist, creative entrepreneur, and the founder of Color Culture. And I'm going to be having a conversation with Florence Jedediah Musenga on Beyond and Above.
As I earlier mentioned, we have our own local poet who has been doing phenomenal things on the international markets and the local markets as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no other than Musenga Katongo. Woo! Yeah! Awesome. So welcome to the program, Musenga.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for hosting us at Color Culture.
Oh, sure, it's my pleasure.
Anyways, even before we get to Color Culture and everything, how you are a 4-time champion internationally and locally, how you're an author, and how you came about with Color Culture, let's first understand where you're coming from.
Sure.
So take us back to your educational background, all the way from primary to tertiary.
Okay, so I think my story starts as far back as 2004, I think. That's when I was at Sunshine Primary School.
Okay.
So I went there especially because there was a Mickey Mouse drawing on the wall fence, so that's what really made me want to even go to that school. So being at Sunshine, I was there all the way up to grade 7. Then in the 8th grade, that's when I went to Material Boys Secondary School.
Nice.
I remember having the chance or the choice to go to Hillcrest when I was in 10th grade, but then I was like, I want to stay at Material Boys.
Nice.
Mainly because it was a day school, I didn't want to go into boarding, but then, I also felt like there was just something.
We were in the same situation. Roma girls, I had the same story.
Exactly. Being a day scholar is nice.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So, like, that was 10th grade, went all the way up to grade 12 at Material Boys Secondary School. And then I went to UNZA, the University of Zambia, where I pursued a bachelor's degree in business administration, which I got, and it's awesome. So Sunshine, Material Boys, and UNZA, only 3 schools my whole life.
A whole degree holder. No, that's really amazing, and that's really outstanding. But take us now to the poetry journey.
Sure.
When did you discover that this was your biggest niche? It's very difficult for young people to discover what they're really good at. Yeah. So at what point did you know that I'm good at poetry and this is what I want to grow in? Okay,
so I guess for me to get to that point, it would be good for me to start a little bit back.
Please take us back.
So I remember starting to write fiction when I was in 4th grade. Because, I would watch Ben 10, I would watch wrestling, or I would watch some movie, and then I'd be inspired and be like, let me write my own story in one of these exercise books.
4th grade, and you were writing. I wonder what I was doing there.
I don't know, that's what
yeah.
So then I started writing hip-hop lyrics shortly after. And then it was only in grade 11 when I got to discover spoken word poetry. When Please Don't Snap, it's a poetry group that was around back then, that they came to Material Boys. And when I heard them perform, I was like, I need to try this, I need to give it a try. But then I feel like the moment, maybe the specific moment when I knew that, this poetry thing is what I'm really good at, may have been in 2017 at the Bittersweet Poetry Slam, which was the first poetry slam I won.
Nice.
So I remember preparing for that, and I had a couple of friends who were really helping me as well, and in fact, a lot of people who came to support me, they did that just to support. But I didn't think I would win. I remember meeting one of my friends back then who was like, we did not think you would win. We're just there for
to give you the hype and everything.
But then I think that moment when I won really did change and set a lot of things for me, especially in the poetry community, because it gave me a newfound confidence, and other poets started to see me differently. So I would like to say it was at that particular slam.
And we see from then on you take a step further to be consistent in it. You know, you now decide to make it like your biggest niche. So And now I'm wondering, because we see you performing firstly in Chad as your first international gig. I don't know what I can call it, but tell us a little bit about that. How was your experience to perform on an international space?
So actually, my first performance was in Zimbabwe.
Oh, nice. I saw Chad only on,
with Chad, what happened was I had the opportunity to represent Zambia as part of a continental poetry slam. That didn't pull through, but it was an opportunity nonetheless. So I remember being super excited about that particular opportunity. And I spent the entirety of 2018 preparing for it because it was the continental slam was, I think, in November 2018, and I had known about it the previous year, so I spent the whole year
waiting for it.
Not waiting.
Preparing. Waiting and preparing.
Yeah, I remember that was the time when I met people like Musenga who I had asked for advice about how to go about poetry. And I met people like Nicholas Kawinga, Jordan Osaka, Jesse Nsofu, different poets who've had experience in poetry. And then I decided to say, no, I need to learn from these people and see what I can gather and what I can learn from them so that I could be ready for the slam, because I really wanted to win it, I was like, if I win this at continental level, I mean, but then it didn't really work out. But my first performance outside Zambia was in Zimbabwe at the Ntwasa Festival. That was 2019, September, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it was a really good experience because that was the Ntwasa Poetry Slam, which I also won. So
nice.
I remember it so vividly. Like, I went into the first round, I was given 10 out of 10 by the judges.
Whoa.
Next round, 10 out of 10. Third round, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And then I was tied with another poet who was reciting in Indevele. And we tied again in the fourth round, So we just kept on going.
So the person who was giving the poem in Indevele is probably Zimbabwe?
Yes.
So you beat him in his own country?
Pretty
wow,
much.
Musenga.
Because what happened was the slam master or the MC was like, let's do crowd reaction. Because clearly the judges kept giving us tens. So a Zimbabwean audience cheered for me to say that I deserved to win that slam.
Wow.
And I would never forget, like,
that was pure talent, you know?
Because I remember I used to go by Messenger back then as a stage name. So they chanted Messenger, and I'm like,
wow.
Is this real? And that's how I won the Ntwasa Poetry Slam. And it was a really great experience. So that was my first international performance.
Wow. And we see you going on further into more international opportunities, but we'll get right into that just after the break. Ladies and gentlemen, we are with Musenga Katongo, but right now we're going to go on a short break. Welcome back. My name is Florence Lenga, and you have joined us on Beyond and Above, where we're joined by Musenga Katongo, a four-time champion when it comes to poetry, internationally and locally, and also a creative entrepreneur. Let's get right back into his story. So Musenga, you've told us about how you now penetrated the international market. And I do believe that once an international door opens, it opens so many opportunities. So let's take you now to Scotland. This year we saw you in Scotland representing Zambia. Tell us a little bit about that, and tell us about the difference between the Zambian arts and the Scottish arts. How best can we improve in that area? Okay,
cool. So when I went to Scotland, I was there for 3 months as part of the European Voluntary Service. So I had been sent alongside another Zambian artist. His name is Stanislas. So he's a circus performer and I'm a poet. So when we went there, we were sent through an organization called Barefoot Theatre to be part of this program, because we're part of the organization and part of the preparations for the Edinburgh Festival Carnival, which was going to be in July. So we went there in May to also participate in some activities with arts communities in Edinburgh. So when I got there, I remember having the chance to have my first performance outside Africa with Intercultural Youth Scotland, which is an organization which is more based for people of color in Edinburgh. So yeah, it was a really great experience having the chance to share my poetry, and then I got to share my poetry with different platforms across Edinburgh.
We could see.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was one performance leading to another invitation, and the like, until eventually I got to build a network of different people who were engaged in spoken word events and the like. So it was a really awesome experience, and I think for me, the biggest milestone on my end as a personally was performing at the Edinburgh Festival Carnival, where I was in front of the largest audience that I've personally performed in front of.
How many were those?
5,000.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah, so I was like, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I was on stage.
Yeah.
And I was even like forgetting my lyrics just before that. But I was on stage and we did the thing because it was a really eye-opening experience because I got to interact with different artists from across the world who are in different disciplines, you know, dancers, drummers, acrobats, dancers, drummers, and acrobats. So like, and these were people from different parts of the world. So I got to learn different words in different languages. I got to learn about different cultures and also collaborate with all of them to see how we can do spoken word with dance, spoken word with acrobatics, spoken word with drumming. And it was really an amazing experience. So yeah. And then the second part of your question about the differences. So I would say the major difference I observed, okay, a lot, but the major ones,
Yes, give us the major ones.
is that the artistic events that I was seeing there were not promoted based on individuals, but based on the concept of that particular activity. So you would have a situation where it's not because this artist is going to be performing at this activity. It's, we're having this activity, show up. And they would show up in numbers, regardless of whether they know the performers or not. And majority of the people, I doubt, were actually really well-known people. Like, you know, they didn't get the super celebrities. I feel like they got people who are good at what they do and gave them a platform to share. So I think that's beautiful. And I think if we're able to have a focus on how we can get people who are skilled in what they do so that they can actually perform based on a certain concept, that's more effective and more powerful than grabbing names. But then I understand that in Zambia, when you do things like this, it's a business. So you obviously want to make sure you get people who will bring numbers and bring people who can attend. Other differences is the support I was seeing for the arts, where I remember seeing the logos on some of the images and the booklets which were talking about the festivals they have, and you're seeing things like City of Edinburgh. So I'm like, you're telling me the City Council is also a partner and is also a partner in these activities, and so much that one of the nicknames for Edinburgh is the City of Festivals. So I'm like, can we also have something similar in Zambia where the government also supports the arts in that regard? Because when you have that kind of support, you have the people who are skilled at what they do create these activities, and then they don't have to think of the business side of everything. They have the resources and the funds. All they have to do is make sure that they deliver something excellent, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add on to that, when Zambia is advertising, when we're doing the whole tourism, we're always talking about the culture and the arts, but where is it? You know, what are we doing about it?
And even to to add on to that, if we are selling the aspect of culture and the like, usually it's traditional dancers, right? Which, that's not a problem. That's my image when I think of Zambia advertising.
Exactly, even just the posters, the billboards.
But then I'm thinking there are other people who are also engaged in the arts in this regard. You know, we've got the people who do the poetry, people who do the music, people who do the paintings. And you know, there are so many different aspects, but then it's like we have this closed-mindedness to what Zambia looks like when we're marketing it to the world. So I feel if there's that kind of engagement and support, we would actually be able to pull off some of the things that other countries are able to do.
And people will start doing it for the passion. Exactly. Now let me take you to color culture.
Sure.
What inspired color culture? How did it start? What inspired the birth of color culture? And what is it all about?
A lot of frustration.
Tell us about the frustrations.
Well, Like, there's so many things that led me to eventually start color culture. But then one of the really big parts of that was, remember the experience I told you about of not going to Chad after preparing for a whole year? Yeah, that can do something to you.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of frustration.
Yeah, so I prepared for the whole year, and then the trip didn't go through. And I remember speaking to my mentor, still my mentor up to now, Stephen Wally, and I was telling him about this whole thing, like, you know, and then he's telling me, don't think of yourself as just an artist, someone who's going to have to wait for someone else to push a particular agenda for him so that he can perform. Start thinking of how you can be the guy in spoken word poetry who can be able to push things, curate things, and make things happen, not just waiting. And then, ding, things just switched
Light bulb.
Yeah, so then my mindset changed. I was like, let me think beyond just being a performer. So then one thing led to another, where I started reading some Zambian books based on Zambian culture and history, and discovering that there are stories that are in those books which I had no clue about, and yet they were so interesting. So I then shared an idea with my mentor again, like, what if we had a platform where we could tell these African and Zambian stories through the arts? And he loved it, and then we began to talk about it more, and that's the super summary story. But yeah, that's how color culture came about, you know?
Yeah.
So a reaction towards having not gotten what I wanted, despite being so prepared for it, and then equally trying to fill in the gap of how there are so many stories out there that need to be told. So yeah.
So how many people do you have under color culture, and how do you go about handling everything?
So we have what's known as the color culture community, which as it now has got about 300 spoken word poets.
Wow.
From not only Zambia but also other parts of the world, primarily Zambia and Zimbabwe, and especially because of the relationship having performed there. So you have these different people from even across Zambia, not just Lusaka. So now what we do is that we curate activities for them and for them to participate in. So we have open mic events, we have these events which tell stories, and then this community is where we draw the people who we would love to perform at these platforms. And we equally also give them opportunities to learn, to be trained, to develop their skills, as well as interact and have opportunities to grow their work through various things that may be out there, you know, as far as publishing, as far as paid gigs, things like that. So that's pretty much how we go about our activities with the spoken word poets that we work with. And it's not only just poets, but even writers and creatives in general, because we also have visual artists and the like. So yeah.
Well, I genuinely do see this as a refugee for a lot of people looking for who can help me out. I am creative, I've got talent, but who can help me out? And I feel if this is something that you can partner with the government, I think it's something that's going to grow big. It's going to go big. And I think it's just a matter of time. You know, you've already shown the world that you can do it. And in a short period of time, I know it's going to go big. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined by Musenga Katongo, an award-winning poet. But for now, we're going to go on a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Beyond and Above. My name is Florence Jedediah Mulenga, and I am joined by an award-winning poet, Musenga Katongo, who has represented Zambia a number of times on the international space and has been doing phenomenal things locally. We were just talking about how he started color culture because he had seen that young people needed a place and a space where they can bring their talents. So Musenga, just to even wrap it up a bit, what advice do you have for that young person who's struggling? They have this talent, they have this skill, but you mentioned the issue of money. Like, they know that maybe they won't get an income out of it, so maybe they don't work on it, but they're so passionate about it. What advice do you have for such a young person? How do they thrive like you did? How do they rise above the ladder?
I feel there's a whole lot of advice I'll give, but I would like, try to break it down.
Please.
So I think the first one would be starting with what you have. So being able to realize that in order for you to execute some of the dreams and goals that you have, you don't necessarily need to have millions of dollars, but then with the resources at your disposal and the relationships you have right where you are, you see how you can leverage them so that you can get started. Because I feel, I remember also having this particular mindset where I believed that I needed to be at a certain stage with all these accomplishments and achievements for me to actually do something. So I wouldn't even start at all. But then I feel there's a power in an idea and being capable of leading other people to fall into that idea so that you can be able to bring it to life. So I would say start with what you have first and foremost. Then I would also say do not neglect the power of networking, because I feel sometimes we're not supposed to wait for people to notice us. You know, we're not supposed to wait for someone to eventually see your value. Sometimes you have to go out there and
make it known.
Exactly, you put yourself out there, because I remember one of the principles I learned from Chaya Deep, one of Zambia's poets, who was amongst the people who inspired me when I was in grade 11. I remember meeting him some years later, and back then I was a super fan. Now we're friends.
Okay.
I spoke to him, and then I asked him for some advice, and he told me, just ask for 5 minutes, you know? And when whatever program it is, whatever event it is, ask for 5 minutes, and make sure in those 5 minutes you kill it. Like, you just confuse them with your poetry. You know what I mean?
Wow, and that's powerful.
Yeah, and then that way you're not asking for too much, but you're saying, with the little you're giving me, I'm able to make do with this. So now I applied that principle in other areas as well, as I was pursuing everything I'm doing now, where you're not asking, you're not entitled to people's time or people's attention. All you're saying is, just give me this one moment and allow me to showcase that I'm capable and I'm valuable enough to be relevant to you. So I feel networking, starting with what you have, making the most of the tiniest opportunities you have, can definitely
open doors. Yeah. That's very powerful. And I'm sure this is something that people are going to really, really pick out the most. The aspect where you mentioned to start with the little that you have. Yeah. A little really goes a long way. Exactly. And that's something that I've also realized in my journey. And also how you mentioned the power of networking. Yeah. You don't expect the big networks to come to you and say, show me what you have. You go to them and say, this is what I have. Exactly. And the last one is also very outstanding. Ask them for a platform and show them what you have. That's really, really, has been really informative, honestly, and I'm sure someone out there has been inspired and they have been encouraged. Any last words you'd love to say to the audience? Any special shout outs? You know, take the floor, it's yours.
Really? Well, I guess any last words? Well, I guess my last words would still be the same, like just hoping that having heard this entire conversation and everything we've talked about, that it would spur someone to do something about it, you know? Because it's one thing to listen to interviews and the like and then not do anything about it. So hopefully...
reading books and not doing anything.
Exactly. Yeah. So hoping that, you know, it actually does spur someone out there to do something relevant. And as far as shout-outs are concerned, I guess I would love to shout out to my team in Color Culture. They are an amazing group of people who believe in the idea, which started a couple of years ago, and they're still going. And I'm grateful for them. And also to my mentor, who is a key part of everything I do, Stephen Mwale. A key part of everything that...
I like how Stephen Mwale believes in young people.
Oh, yeah,
the first time I met him, it was belief in us, the young people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, even naming everybody, Keisha, Jonathan, Naomi, and Josiah, and the Color Culture team. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us, Musenga, and thank you for hosting us at Color Culture. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Musenga Katongo, an award-winning poet. He's also a creative entrepreneur and an author, a TEDx speaker. Too bad we didn't get to talk about that.
Okay.
But ladies and gentlemen, there is more of this story. You need to look him up, Musenga Katongo, on all of his socials. Thank you for joining us. My name is Florence Jedediah Mlenga, and this is Beyond and Above.
Nobody knows about the beautiful struggles, the charming pain, the dazzling discomfort, the merriment that exists within conflict and affliction. Listen, Man has a tendency of looking to the great amongst them, and we incubate a thought of some sort like the great were born great. Like no PhD holder ever once wrote mocks, like no castle was ever just blocks. Like the greatest comedian never once cracked bad jokes, and no gold miner just found rocks, yet there is concealed work behind every great structure. So I just had an amazing interview with Florence Musenga on Beyond and Above, so I hope you can catch the next episode because I'm sure it's going to be really amazing. Peace.